The Decline of Bees in North America, a melding of artistic and scientific reflection. By incorporating art and literature with data about the decline of bees in North America, viewers can be reminded of our deep and critical relationship with the bee. In North America, and much of the world, the European honeybee is bred and managed for honey production, but even more so for use in commercial pollination operations to support food production for a growing human population.
The Honey Tree by Mary Oliver. And so at last I climbed the honey tree, ate chunks of pure light, ate the bodies of bees that could not get out of my way, ate the dark hair of the leaves, the rippling bark, the heartwood. Such frenzy! But joy does that, I'm told, in the beginning. Later, maybe, I'll come here only sometimes and with a middling hunger. But now, I climb like a snake. I clamber like a bear to the nuzzling place, to the light savaged by the thighs of bees and racked up in the body of the tree. Oh, anyone can see how I love myself at last, how I love the world, climbing by day or night, in the wind, in the leaves, kneeling at the secret rip, the chords of my body stretching and singing in the heaven of appetite.
For millennia, humans have shared a deep spiritual and practical connection with bees. The Egyptian bee amulet on the far left dates from 2100 BCE. The left-facing bee is from around 1800 BCE. The green bee scarab is from the reign of one of Egypt's female pharaohs, Hatshepsut, around 1460 BCE. And the gold bee ornament on the far right is from Indonesia sometime between the 8th and 10th century AD. Bees remain important symbols in our culture, from ball gowns to baseball teams, and of course, in our literature.
An excerpt from The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. And now you ask in your heart, how shall we distinguish that which is good in pleasure from that which is not good? Go to your fields and your gardens, and you shall learn that it is the pleasure of the bee to gather honey of the flower. But it is also the pleasure of the flower to yield its honey to the bee. For to the bee, a flower is a fountain of life, and to the flower, a bee is a messenger of love. And to both, bee and flower, the giving and receiving of pleasure is a need and an ecstasy. People of Orphalese, be in your pleasures like the flowers and the bees.
The bee is in trouble. From April of 2014 to April of 2015, it is estimated that beekeepers in the United States lost approximately 40% of their hives. That is an annual loss of twice what is considered sustainable.
So we should have substantially more apples on than are here. At this time of year, this tree's branches should be hanging all the way down to the ground with the amount of apples that are there. But because I didn't have the 60 beehives, we will probably not even get more than a couple thousand pounds of apples off of this entire block, and we probably won't even harvest it.
After years spent working on Buicks and Harleys, my dad could crush bees between the palms of his hands and sting us all with words. Approximately 1/3 of the world's food supply today depends on pollination by insects, mostly bees. The most famous scientist of modern times, Albert Einstein, once said, "If the bees ever die out, mankind will follow 4 years later."
A crop duster inadvertently sprayed down the road, and the wind blew the chemical onto my beehives and wiped them all out. Diseases and pests are difficult, but if you understand good beekeeping practices, they're not as big of an issue as the human factor.
The threats to bees in North America are many. For honeybees, colony collapse disorder, or CCD, is a serious problem. It's not well understood because the bees just vanish. It impacts commercial hives as well as backyard beekeepers alike. The bees just simply leave the hives and stop reproducing. Honeybees are also susceptible to disease from bacteria and viruses, fungal infections. They're susceptible to parasites, especially the varroa mite. And potentially the most problematic are pesticides and other chemicals that are man-made problems inflicting damage to bees. One attempt at developing a safer insecticide for bees was to coat the seeds with a group of chemicals called neonicotinoids, rather than spraying chemicals on live plants. Though the intentions were good, it has been proven to be potentially even more harmful. The threats to native bees in North America are just as numerous. They suffer from a loss of habitat to urbanization and agricultural growth. There are invasive species replacing their native food sources. They have competition from imported European honeybees. They also suffer from various diseases and pests, and from the same pesticides and man-made chemicals that are damaging the honeybee population. The bumblebee populations in North America are 30% smaller than when compared to the populations from 1870, and 10 species have decreased their population by more than half just since 1991. Solitary bees in North America have decreased by 15%, and declines in some of these highly specialized solitary bees have led to declines in certain plants that require very specialized pollination, making those plants vulnerable to extinction.
Full of bees we killed an hour, saying a lot of nothing, trying to say something, and the weather was perfect. The children were getting hurt, it wasn't too sunny or hot or anything like that, and the clover pulled at our bees inside. It bit for a minute, saying all that nothing over and through all the something, like honey seeping out. Sappy children with their contusions and tantrums, they brought perfect purple blossoms, even with tears and the leaves broken. It was such a beautiful day for crying in the park, and I can't lie, it seemed like your bees were really fat, loud flies, and my bees were bees.
Our food economy relies on bees. In the U.S. alone, native pollinators, mostly solitary bees, are responsible for the production of over $3 billion worth of fruits and vegetables per year. Without including the value of the honey, honeybees are estimated to be responsible for pollinating an additional $6 to $16 billion worth of food in the U.S. per year. Other industries that would likely become obsolete with the decline or elimination of bees in North America are the landscaping industry, gardening and garden supply, and the floral industry.
Bumblebee by Jeanette Powers. The Queen would kill me if she knew I was blowing off my work like this. But it's irresistible, being suddenly irreplaceable in a soap opera field drama. I didn't even know sunflowers could speak, but as I buzzed her up, sucking her yellow bits, her seeds and stamens stammered to life and whispered huskily, "Can you tell houseflower for me?" I was taken aback, as if the hive had asked me to pollinate the moon. "What's a houseflower?" Sunflower turned her face and nodded to the place called the greenhouse, which none of us went into, and clearly there in the window was a strange flower with a star-sparkle face who nodded in clear, excited response. And I knew there was a great love there between the free of the field and the walled of the house. "Tell him I love him to seed." Of course, I buzzed right over and learned to speak in wing beat, whispering the message in my way, and thus began my go-between of the secret tryst between hothouse orchid and fieldweed sunflower. "Tell her I love her like water and sun." "Say I bloom brighter for him." "Tell her she makes the sun seem dim." "Say the moon pales before his petals." The spring turned to summer, turned fall, and every crisp, brisk-winded day I about burst with the fairied love of their romance, zipping each message and listening and telling. I was the lips of their longing. I began to feel as if that look of adoration and desperation was for me. I admit freely that I was drunk, buzzing on it, and would gladly suffer the whole of the hive's angry swarm to be a bee centered in the swoon of their deep love. "I live for you behind this glass." "I will die for you in this field." And autumn threatened to turn leafless and grim. The cold rains began, which wouldn't be dried till spring. And one day, each had a message. Each was the same. "Come to me. Come to me." Sunflower and orchid both trapped in the dirt of their birth, from seed to splendor and back, and neither would ever be able to move to the other. And I was suddenly thankful for wings and queens, and instead of delivering with whispered fever, I flat refused by saying to each a solid, "No, my duty must return to the hive." And my legs laden heavy with the last of their sweet pollen, I made my nectar in hexacombs, heart swelling with how my world makes sugar out of longing. And the honey was so good that year.
Honey has been a part of the human diet for at least 9,000 years. There are literary references to beekeeping as far back as 0 AD, and archaeological evidence of it estimated to be from about 900 BCE. Honey would have been an exceptional treat and a valuable food energy source.
There are several subspecies of bees. There is Italian and Cardiniolan, those are the two most common. Then you have Russians and Caucasians, which are less common. They don't breed as quickly as the Italians do. The Italian bees are what is typically done for honey production because they tend to make the largest stores. The color is what differentiates them mostly. The yellower the bee, the more Italian it is in its pedigree. The darker, the blacker the bee, the more Carniolan. Well, the reason that people are somewhat afraid of bees has to do with the media creating the killer bee during the 90s. Yes, the Africanized bee was brought into South America to cross, and I have worked with some quote-unquote Africanized bees, and they are much meaner. You do have to wear protective gear when you're working with the hives.
Telling the Bees by John Greenleaf Whittier. Here's the place right over the hill, runs the path I took. You can see the gap in the old wall still, and the stepping stones in the shallow brook. There is the house with the gate red barred, and the poplars tall, and the barn's brown length and the cattle yard, and the white horns tossing above the wall. There are the beehives ranged in the sun, and down by the brink of the brook are her poor flowers weed o'errun, pansy and daffodil, rose and pink. A year has gone as the tortoise goes, heavy and slow, and the same rose blows, and the same sun glows, and the same brook sings of a year ago. There's the same sweet clover smell in the breeze, and the June sun warm tangles his wings of fire in the trees, setting, as then, over Fernside Farm. I mind me how, with a lover's care, from thy Sunday coat, I brushed off the burrs and smoothed my hair, and cooled at that brookside my brow and throat. Since we parted, a month had passed, to love a year. Down through the beeches I looked at last on the little red gate and the well sweep near. I can see it all now, the slantwise rain of light through the leaves, the sundown's blaze on her window pane, the bloom of her roses under the eaves. Just the same as a month before, the house and the trees, the barn's brown gable, the vine by the door, nothing changed but the hives of bees. Before them, under the garden wall, forward and back, went drearily singing the chore girl small, draping each hive with a shred of black. Trembling, I listened. The summer sun had a chill of snow, for I knew she was telling the bees of one. Gone on the journey, we all must go. Then I said to myself, my Mary weeps for the dead today. Haply her blind old grandsire sleeps, the fret and the pain of his age away. But her dog whined low on the doorway sill, with his cane to his chin. The old man sat, and the chore girl still sung to the bees stealing out and in. And the song she was singing ever since in my ear sounds on. Stay at home, pretty bees, fly not hence. Mistress Mary is dead and gone.
you can see I'm not even wearing any protective gear because it's not really necessary with well-kept bees. So this is actually, he's making a clone from this beehive. He took a couple of frames of brood and a couple of frames of honey from the lower part, and he put a queen bee cell up here. And this top box, he's making another hive.
We can all help to save the bees. Be careful what you plant. Find out what is native in your region. If it is native, it probably has a native pollinator bee and will probably require less care and fewer chemicals to maintain. Also, be careful what you kill. Often the weeds in your lawn are native plants that provide much needed nectar to native bees and butterflies, including clover and dandelions, especially in early spring before many other flowers have bloomed. Many commercial insecticides that are intended to kill pests will also kill bees. I hope that through these various pieces of artwork and literature, you have been reminded of the deep connection that people hold with bees. I'd like to thank the Metropolitan Museum of Art, as well as local farmer and beekeeper Josh LeNave, and local poets John Dorsey, Iris Applequist, and Jeanette Powers for their contributions to this work. I hope you found it inspiring.